Hey everyone, it's Mike, Headland Around the Yard, and this week I'm going to talk about some plants that are resistant to animal damage. We all have issues with animals attacking your plants in the garden, and so I'm going to talk about some things that you can do, specific types of plants that you can grow, especially in the flower garden and around your house. Plant some things that are resistant to animal damage. All right, stick around. Hey everyone, so it's Mike. I've got a list of plants here. So I'm talking about plants, animals attacking your plants. I have this problem all the time. My specific problem is with deer and voles. Deer tend to eat my plants like my hosta. They've eaten my trees. They've eaten my grapevines. They've eaten different things around my yard. And so today I'm talking about some things that you can plant that the animals don't like. And so I hope this helps. Most of these, I have almost all these in my yard. So this should be helpful if you're trying to expand the types of plants that you have around your house and not have to worry about the animals attacking them. All right, so let's start off. First, I'm going to discuss some bulbs. I've done a couple of bulb videos, and I did one where I planted bulbs in pots because I was worried about the voles digging over and eating the bulbs and stuff like that. So I like to plant lots of different bulbs, but what types of bulbs can you plant in the ground that you don't have to worry about voles and gophers and stuff like that digging up and eating the bulbs? Well, number one on the list is, of course, the daffodil. The daffodil it's poisonous. The bulb is poisonous. The leaves are poisonous. Everything is poisonous to animals. It doesn't kill them. It makes them sick. So they tend to stay away. And they will just stay away from the plant altogether. And that's why I plant daffodil bulbs all around plants that I want to keep that may not be animal resistant. If I plant the daffodil bulbs around them, the daffodils come up, the deer will stay away from that plant, and the bulbs underground create a wall around that plant that keeps the voles away, because they come across the bulb, they turn around and go the other way. Now, it doesn't work 100% of the time, but it's pretty effective at deterring animals. So daffodils are number one on my list. Number two on the list is the iris. So I'm not at my house this week, so I kind of am just doing this video here, and I can't show you all these plants, so I'll be posting pictures of the different plants as I talk about them. The irises, I have lots of different varieties. I have them all over my flower gardens, all around my house in different areas, and they do not get attacked by either the deer or the voles in my area. I'm not sure about whether or not gophers would go after them. Irises are not typically listed in the list of plants that are deer resistant. So, but they are, in my experience, my irises are going crazy, and I do not have any animal problems with my irises. So that is one that seems to be pretty resistant to getting attacked by animals. Number three is another bulb. It's the lily of the valley. Now, lily of the valley is mostly there's a lot of greenery, and then it's got these really small, delicate white flowers that grow on it. It's a very interesting flower. It does flower later in the May, June time period. So my lily of the valley greenery is just starting to poke through the ground now at the beginning of April. And so it'll probably have flowers sometime in May when it starts to flower, because it needs to be a little bit warmer for that to happen. But it'll flower for more than a month, I think. I'm pretty sure it goes clear into late June, but the flowers continue to be on the plant. So it's a nice one as well. Lily of the valley is nice when you have a large grouping of it planted together. And a lot of these flowers look better with large groupings together. All right. Number 4 is another flower I really like is peonies. So a peony, there's lots of different varieties of peonies. I have 5 or 6 different varieties. I have a whole row of peonies on my one flower bed, and we're trying to expand those. And I think it's just the scent of the plant itself and the flowers that deter deer and voles and other animals. They don't like peonies. Now, some people might think, well, that's great, animals don't like peonies, but bugs do. There's kind of a myth about some bugs on peonies. You will see black ants climbing on your peonies. Now, these are not bad. The black ants are not eating the plant. They're not destroying the plant in any way. In fact, they may be even helping the plant. The black ants climb up on the plant when the flower is still a bulb before it opens. There's a little ball at the top of the stem where the flower is going to come out, and the ants get up there and they like to eat the sap that's coming out of there before the flower opens. And there's some argument that them eating, they chew a little bit of the edges of that to get to the sap, and that may help the flower to open and bloom. So don't kill those ants. Just leave them alone. They're not hurting anything. I've never had a problem with my flowers looking bad. In fact, they always look beautiful. So I don't worry about the black ants. I see them on there every year, but I just leave them alone and my flowers look amazing. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. Now we get to stuff that aren't really bulbs, but they're still, they are perennials or annuals that self-seed themselves. And the first one is bee balm. So bee balm is another one that has lots of different varieties. The flowers may look different based on the variety. They're very tall. They get about 3 foot tall. So it's a nice flower to have in a background, but it's also, if you have a large grouping of it, you don't want to buy a plant, a bee balm plant. If you bought 4 or 5 bee balm plants, you don't want to space them far apart. They actually do better closer together in a grouping. So that's how you should plant them. And then once they grow up and get really established, they grow into a big mass of just flowers, and they flower for weeks on end in the summertime. So they're a summertime flower. And they're really good. They attract bees, and it's called bee balm because it attracts bees, but it also attracts butterflies. So it's a good thing for pollinators. Number 6 is another flower, just like bee balm. It's tall, attracts a lot of butterflies. This also attracts hummingbirds. It's the snapdragon. They get a long stalk with flowers all the way up and down them. So the snapdragon is great for attracting bees, butterflies, even hummingbirds. But again, it grows best in a grouping rather than individual plants here and there. So that's how you want to establish those. And once they get established, then the mass of plant and flowers really looks amazing. All right, and then next is something that every gardener probably puts, if you have any experience with trying to deter pests in your vegetable garden, you plant marigolds. Marigolds are not attacked by animals in any way. In fact, I think it's just because of the smell. Marigolds smell amazing to us, but apparently that's a horrible smell to animals, so they stay away. But marigolds are edible, but they're just best. They provide color, and they attract beneficial insects, and they actually deter bad insects in your garden. That's why so many gardeners will plant marigolds in and amongst their vegetable plants in the garden. You'll see a lot of gardeners plant flowers in their vegetable garden because that's what they're trying to do, is attract the beneficial insects and deter the bad insects. But it also deters animals. Marigolds are specifically known for deterring rabbits in your garden. So you'll want to get some of those. Next is one flower that I've never planted, and I'll have to, I came across this flower on my list, and I thought, I'm going to have to get some seeds for this and plant this. It's called the floss flower. The one thing I like about it is it's different in color than a lot of your summer flowers, because a lot of your summer flowers are your reds and yellows and oranges and in that type of shade. Whereas the floss flower you can get in purple. And so I like it for that reason. And it'll be a different type of flower that you can attract. It'll attract beneficial insects and deter bad insects, but it also deters animals. They don't like the floss flower for some reason. All right. And then that's about it for the flowers. Now let's get into some ground covers. So the number one ground cover that I like to put around flower beds and around trees and stuff like that is hosta. But hosta is not animal resistant, so it's not on this list. In fact, hosta is like candy to deer. It's as if, you put some hosta out and then all they see is a giant smorgasbord out there. So they're coming after that hosta. So I'll have to do another video on how to deter deer from your hosta, because there are ways to do that. I plant a lot of hosta because I like my hosta. The deer do eat some of it. Well, one of the ways is to just plant a lot of it, and you figure they can't eat it all, but you would be wrong. But there are ways to deter them from eating all your hosta. So I'll do that in another video. But so that hosta is not on the list. But one of the things that is on the list is something that I do have everywhere in my yard, and it's liriope. Now, I've talked about this before. Liriope is a great ground cover. It chokes out weeds, so that's one great thing about it. It gets flowers on it that attracts a lot of pollinators in the fall. So, spring and summer, there's plenty of flowers on other types of plants. There's not a lot of fall flowering plants for the bees and that to hurry up and get their stores for the winter. Well, liriope gets its flowers in the fall, and it's great for pollinators. It gets enough flowers that they can stock up for the winter. And liriope spreads very easily. In fact, you can split it. You can split, if you had a clump of liriope, you could split it in 4 every single year if you want, and it will not kill the plant. In fact, if you know how to kill liriope, let me know. Other than dumping Roundup on it, and I don't even think that works. Liriope is a ground cover. It's almost invasive. I had it in a flower bed. Next to that flower bed is a sidewalk that's about 3 to 4 feet wide. The liriope actually got all the way under the sidewalk and came up on the other side because it spread through roots, and so it made it across the sidewalk. So it can be a little invasive, but it's a nice ground cover to use, especially for borders. It's great for borders, but you have to keep it under control. Now you can I weed whack it in the fall. Just cut it down with a weed whacker all the way to the ground, and don't worry, you won't kill it. Like I said, if you know how to kill it, let me know. But I've never been able to kill it. I've dug it up, put it in a bucket, and left it there for a year, and it still grows. So, and that bucket may or may not get water. I put it in a bucket with a hole in the bottom, and there's no water. It dries out and everything. But as soon as you dump it out on the ground and it touches the soil, it comes back to life. And it's crazy how resilient liriope is. So, but it is a great ground cover to use, and it's totally resistant to deer and voles and every other animal. Another one that I have, now this is something that I never planted, but it's just totally natural. I have a whole forest under some trees in the back near the woods in my house. It's ferns. It's a whole forest of ferns that grow every year back there, and it looks amazing. So any type of fern really is animal resistant. So if you have it, but ferns like to grow in shady areas. So if you have some areas under trees that you want to grow some ground cover, plant some ferns. You want to start them out in groupings, but they will spread, and then you'll have these nice ferns. The ones I have are they probably grow about 18 inches tall, and then they'll have this mass of ferns back there, and it's in a shaded area under some trees that I don't have grass growing, so I like to see the ferns back there in the summer. Next is another ground cover that I don't have, and I don't know that I've ever seen it in Virginia, where I live in Zone 7A. But I'm in Ohio right now, and I see it all over up here. This is Zone 6A, so it's only a slightly different growing zone, but it's called Pachysandra. Now, Pachysandra is another one that it spreads through roots underground, and it grows really well in partially shaded areas. And it is especially good if it's a wet area. It will grow even better. So if you have an area of your yard that's kind of shaded and it stays wet a lot, plant some Pachysandra. It'll go wild. And it looks really nice. It stays about, I don't know, 8 to 10 inches tall at the most. Get some flowers on it. I think more in the fall it gets the flowers. But it's a nice ground cover as well. Now we get into some bushes that you can plant. And then the first on my list is one that I really like. It's the butterfly bush. Now the butterfly bush, it'll grow up. It can grow pretty big, but I cut mine down to about 18 inches every year, and it just grows back to 3 or 4 feet tall every year, and it gets flowers all over it. These big, long groups of flowers that butterflies love. Bees also love it, but I have a butterfly garden where we're building up, and good thing for butterfly garden is the butterfly bush, some bee balm, the snapdragon, stuff like that, down in a butterfly garden, and they're all resistant to animals. So I don't know why the deer don't like butterfly bush. Probably just because there's not a lot of, the leaves don't look tasty to me. So of course I don't eat a lot of bush leaves, but yeah, it's a resistant plant, and it's really nice. It attracts butterflies. We get tons of butterflies on our butterfly bushes every year. Next is it's another one that I don't see on lists, but in my experience, it has never been attacked by any animal. It's called the viburnum. Now, viburnum comes in lots of different varieties, and but it gets these nice. They're kind of like, it reminds me of a hydrangea, because they're like balls of flowers all over. They're not as solid like a ball like a hydrangea, but it's just like there'll be groupings of masses of flowers that kind of reminds me of hydrangea, but it just gets so many flowers on in the springtime that it's amazing. So viburnum bushes, and different varieties grow different areas. They can tolerate partial shade, but the more sun they get, the more flowers you're going to get, so that's better for them. But mine have been resistant to any kind of animal attack. And then, of course, especially for shade bushes, any kind of rhododendron, mountain laurel, depending on the type of, they're in the same family. Deer don't seem to, they have like a waxy leaf, and I guess deer don't like that time. Holly is another one that doesn't, the deer don't seem to attack because of the type of leaf. They're more waxy leaf. And boxwood don't get eaten by deer as much because I think it's just the type of leaves on them, and the waxy style leaves on the bushes seem to keep the deer away. So that's what you have for bushes. My next group of plants that you can plant around are in the herb family. So you've got thyme and oregano and chives and sage, lavender, any of the herbs. Most of the herbs are resistant to a lot of animal attacks. There are some herbs that animals like, especially rabbits, might like, but most of the herbs are resistant just because of the smell. A lot of them are very strongly scented. Now, you might think, well, you're planting those in the garden. No, I don't have any herbs planted in my garden. In fact, all of my herbs currently are planted in my rose garden because I have rose bushes that are 3-4 feet tall. Well, most of these herbs like thyme, oregano, chives, they are very low growing and they're like a ground cover. Thyme will spread as a ground cover, and it's a great thing to put in there, and animals don't like the smell, so they stay away. In fact, the rose bushes, some of my rose bushes have been attacked by the voles and eaten and killed, but the ones right next to my thyme have survived very well. And it could be because of the thyme. They don't like the smell of either the roots or the plant itself. So I've been planting all of my herbs in and amongst my rose garden, and they're doing well. I mean, I even had parsley that survived the winter and came back, and it's coming back with a vengeance this spring. So we're gonna have lots of parsley this year. I have plenty of mint. Of course, mint survives, and mint. No animal likes mint because of the smell of the plant. But sage is one. Sage is another. It's just sage is very similar to a butterfly bush now that I think about it. But that's just another one that the animals don't seem to like. So a lot of your herbs you can plant, and you can plant them around as conversation pieces or decorative plants. They don't have to be, just because they're herbs doesn't mean that they have to be in the vegetable garden. You can plant them around. Like I said, I plant them. I don't even have herbs in my vegetable garden, other than I had sage in there last year. But other than that, I don't have a lot of herbs in my vegetable garden because they'll grow everywhere, and I put them in other places, and they're growing pretty well in those other places. Most of these come back. Thyme, oregano, chives, the parsley. I didn't think the parsley would survive the winter and come back, but it did. So sage will survive the winter and come back. I wish basil would, but it doesn't. But yeah, a lot of the herbs are great to plant in other areas of your yard, and they'll be resistant to animals. All right, but that's all I have on my list so far. I continue to add things to this, but I am going to talking about the herbs. I am going to have a future video where I'm going to go over how I preserve those herbs, because we preserve all the herbs I grow. I will take cuttings and I'll preserve those. We either dry them out, or there are other ways to preserve things. But and if you don't need a dehydrator to dry out herbs. Dehydrators are expensive. I've tried to look at them, and I don't want to spend $400 or $500 for a dehydrator to dry some herbs that don't cost that much. So I've learned how to dehydrate them for free, basically. So go over that in another video. So I hope that this video has been informative. I hope that you've enjoyed it, and be sure to subscribe, tell your friends, share this video on your social media, and then keep piddling around the yard, and I'll see you next week.